we wait a few more minutes or should we start now?
I think you can start, Venerable.
Okay. So, good morning, Singapore. I understand you had some elections yesterday. So some of you may still be asleep or sleepy. I hope everything went well according to your wishes and for the benefit of sentient beings. So this is a set of lectures on the particular prayer at the end of the Guru Puja, the Lama Chopa Puja. And this puja was composed by the Panchen Lama, the First Panchen Lama, or sometimes called retrospectively the Fourth Panchen Lama, because after he was recognized, given the name Panchen Lama, 3 previous incarnations were said, oh, they are also Panchen Lamas. So sometimes he's called the Fourth Panchen Lama, sometimes he's called the First Panchen Lama. So I think I might have mentioned before, I had the chance of meeting the previous Panchen Lama who died, 25 years ago or 30 years ago. I had a chance of meeting him in Tibet when I went there along with FPMT students, and Lama Sopa Rinpoche. Rinpoche had offered his practice, the practice of the FPMT, to His Holiness the Dalai Lama earlier that year, I think. And His Holiness said during the you know what that means, offering the practice, that, like when we of the various kinds of offering, the very best offering is offering of your practice, which can be just explaining what you did, or it can be imagining all of the virtues that you created as a pleasure garden and so forth. And even the merits of other people who practice in the path, imagining it as a beautiful, like the Singapore flower garden down by the sea there. So I had a chance of meeting him, and he was a huge being. He had been left behind in Tibet when the Dalai Lama and many Tibetans escaped. Some Tibetans thought he was a traitor, but His Holiness said, no, he was a great bodhisattva who was willing to stay behind and act as a representative of the true Dharma in Tibet. He was beaten by the authorities at the time and so forth. But before he passed away, he gave a long life initiation of Amitabha. And I think the Panchen Lamas are considered to be an emanation of Amitabha, which I had a chance of attending, and actually got to sit on the stage with him and even had a talk. So I have some sort of heartfelt feeling that I must have some karmic connection with the Panchen Lamas. So this prayer is especially useful, the Lama Chopa in general, but the glance meditation at the end of Lama Chopa, which is what we began talking about last week. And the very first verse, I had talked about supreme field of merit as in using the FPMT translation. My perfect Guru, through the power of having made offerings and respectful requests, I seek your blessings, protector and root of happiness and goodness, that I might come under your joyful care, joyful guidance. And I mentioned that when it talked about happiness and goodness, that means the root of the happiness of future lives, and definite goodness means achievement of liberation or enlightenment, which is, even more, which is better even than just happiness of future lifetimes. So we talked about that a little bit. And then I mentioned, after a question, I mentioned that you didn't have to recite, it's not part of the actual Lama Chopa prayer, what Lama Zopa had added, practicing Guru devotion with 9 attitudes, something that Rinpoche added because he thought it was very special. I myself add a couple of different things, like for instance, when we talk about in the request to the Guru as Mahayana Guru, which came earlier in the puja, after saying that verse, I often recite the verse from the Mahayana Sutra Alamkara that talks about the 10 qualities of a Mahayana Guru. So, you know, you may have certain prayers or verses that you insert at various places, or you may like to follow Rinpoche's instruction there. But the second verse was, we talked about last time also, realizing how this body of liberty and richness or endowments is found but once, just once, is difficult to obtain and quickly lost. I seek your blessings to make it meaningful, worthwhile, and to take the essence, to take its meaningful essence without being distracted by the meaningless affairs of this life. So this is the first verse was talking about the first topic of the Lamrim in general, and then the second verse is talking about the what do we say? Yes, is talking about generating the attitude that strives for the aims of future samsaric lives. So this is after the verse on Guru devotion, and this began with this, lenchik samshik, nepe deljordi, this leisure and endowment, or as it says, liberty and endowments, that is found just this one time, like so rare to find this attitude, like a blind turtle coming to the top of the sea and putting its neck through a golden yoke. So I thought in review, I would just mention one or two of the things from Muchu Dharma Bhadra's commentary, which I've been using. I mentioned last time, there's a commentary by Muchu Dharma Bhadra. And, okay. And so one of the things he says in this context, he says generating the attitude that seeks the future aims. It's kind of like what we would say, developing an attitude of, working for the future rather than just right now. And he said that is synonymous with turning away from the superficial appearances of this life. As sometimes some of you may be familiar with the Sakya tradition, the parting from the 4 attitudes, 4 appearances. So if you're just concerned with the here and now, it's very difficult to develop an attitude working for some goal in the future, especially future lives. But that's usually considered to be, I just saw Catherine Lau entered the waiting room. Hi, Catherine. That's considered to be an attitude of a mature person, someone who's able to put off the immediate gratification. What do we call, and work for something in the future rather than being concerned with just this right now. And Muchu Dharma Bhadra's commentary says, with regard to this tradition or this topic, there are 2 traditions. Like for instance, Lama Tsongkhapa wrote he wrote the long Lamrim, the great Lamrim, the Lamrim Chemo. He wrote the Lamrim Ding, the middling Lamrim. He wrote a brief Lamrim, and he also wrote the three principal aspects of the path. A Lamrim that was based on a little bit different presentation that was suggested that he compose by his, the actual Buddha of wisdom on Jushri. So this, Mutra Bhadra says that here in this verse, this is in accord with the presentation and the three principal aspects of the path, which means that it is practiced by means of joining two meditations that usually come in the Lamrim as separate. One of them is the body of leisure and endowment, which has the recognition of the perfect human rebirth, leisure and endowment, its great meaning and the difficulty to achieve, difficulty to find again, and so forth. And to join that with a meditation on impermanence, death and impermanence. So this says, realizing how the body of liberties and endowments is found but once, is difficult to obtain, and is quickly lost. So the is quickly lost, just in those few words, that's indicating all of the meditations on death and impermanence. And that tradition of joining these two together, these two meditations together, meditation on the perfect human rebirth and death and impermanence, is said to be have some special qualities, because in recognizing the fact that this life that is so meaningful that we have right now, that has such great potential to be able to achieve great things, is quickly decaying, is impermanent, and that we will definitely die. This gives more emphasis, more meaning, some special quality to the realizations. So he says some other things also, but and also, for instance, that when you talk about impermanence, that you should think about the three roots, the three root meditations of death and impermanence in the Gelugpa tradition, that it's come down from the Kadampas, that death is definite, the time of death is indefinite, and at the time of death there's nothing else that helps except the Dharma and so forth. So there's 9 reasons altogether, and certain decisions, keeping those in mind that you make. The decision that you make from recognizing that death is definite, that I must practice the Dharma, and the decision you make from having it, understanding that the time of death is indefinite, you could die at any time, I must practice now. And the third, that at the time of death, nothing helps except the Dharma. The decision that you make from that, having understood that, realized that, is that I must practice just Dharma, pure Dharma. Try to integrate it into all of my activities, because it doesn't mean that you have to sit on your cushion all day and never eat food or never work or never wash the dishes or take a bath or anything like that. It means that you have to learn how to integrate all of those things into the Dharma. So then the second verse we talked about also last time, I introduced last time, is this is the next outline here. So the first one was generating the attitude that seeks the aims of future lifetimes. So that was the perfect human rebirth with impermanence. Then the second one is showing the method of future samsaric happiness. And that begins with this Ngenso Dugnel. So aghast at the searing blaze of suffering of the lower realms, I take heartfelt refuge in the 3 gems. Right. I take heartfelt refuge in the 3 precious gems of the Triratna, and seek your blessings that I might eagerly strive to abandon all negativities and accomplish the accumulation of every virtue. So the Tibetans, when we say the 3 precious gems is translated here, actually the Tibetans say Kon Chok Sum. Kon means rare, Chok supreme, sum, three, the three rare supremities, not the three supremes, but the three rare supremities, rare supreme entities, which is another, the Tibetans like to, rather than saying three gems or the triratna, they took the etymology of ratna as meaning something that was rare to give more flavor to it and something that's supreme. So we began that last time, and here the first verse is talking about the suffering of the lower realms. So in Mutra Dharmabhadra's commentary, just to add a little flavor to this, he quotes a text by Nagarjuna, which is not one that's so easily available in translation. It's called Luki Tenjo Kewo Soe Tikpa, a drop of nourishment for beings, or a treatise on ethical conduct. Anyway, he says, you should meditate every day, recall every single day the hot and extremely hot and cold hells. You should recall also the pretas, the yidaks, who are emaciated due to hunger and thirst. You should recall the Monkpe Dugnel Rapngawe Jorsong. You should recall also the animal realm, which is overcome with the suffering of ignorance. And we talked a little bit about how, in some ways, some presentations, even the animal realm is considered to be more lower than the Preta realm, because although the Preta realm has more direct suffering, the animals are overcome by ignorance. And so there are some Pretas who are actually sharp and could understand the Dharma and so forth. So you should recall every day these sufferings of the lower realms. Of course, you've heard Lama Zopa Rinpoche and many other lamas say, every day you should remember impermanence and death and so forth. I heard, maybe some of you heard the teaching by His Holiness the Dalai Lama the other day that he gave when he said every day he wakes up, he recites this verse from, I think, the fundamental treatise on wisdom by Nagarjuna, about where is the person, sort of to recall about the selflessness of persons, or about emptiness. So here, what Nagarjuna is saying, you should recall every day about the suffering of the lower realms. And so there are various recollections that are very, very important. Maybe in a sense, the glance meditation that we're doing here, if you do that every day, it kind of helps you to recall all of those things. Yeah. So yeah, I won't go into more detail about that, about the commentary there. But so when we take refuge in the three jewels, or three rare supremacies, or three rare supreme ones, what we need to do is we have to have two causes of refuge. So when you're meditating here, you can recall those. You know what the two causes of refuge are? You have to have a certain trepidation or fear or concern that is bothering you, that you need to seek refuge from. Some kind of saving grace that will prevent something that you're afraid of. And you need to have an object of refuge that you have faith in, or in some texts, it mentions at the very beginning, maybe we don't have faith in the Buddha, the Dharma, and the Sangha. You know, they're just names, especially Westerners, other than Singaporeans. Most of you have come, many of you have come from Buddhist families, but people in the West, you know, it's just the same, especially people that might tend to be atheists or everything, you know, oh, Buddha, Dharma, and Sangha is just the same as God and Jesus and the Holy Spirit, or, you know, so forth and so on. And they don't have any faith. So some hope, you need to have at least hope that this is a refuge that can protect you. And the way that you would develop both of those causes of refuge is through practice and study and experience over the years. It's said that refuge is like, for instance, sometimes people take a refuge ceremony and they think, oh no, now I'm a Buddhist, I've taken the refuge ceremony. I joke sometimes in Singapore, sometimes people think they're Buddhist because it's written on their birth certificate or in their passport that they're Buddhist. So therefore they're Buddhist. From a Buddhist point of view, that's not the definition, that's not the deciding criterion of being a Buddhist. The deciding characteristic of being a Buddhist is someone who takes refuge from the depth of their heart, sincerely, in the Buddha, the Dharma, and the Sangha. So the commentary by Nutra Dharmabhadra reminds us that the Buddha is the teacher who shows what is to be taken up and what is to be discarded. You know, what we say langdor, that which is to be practiced and that which is to be shunned. So what we want to practice is virtue, good heart, and compassion, and wisdom, and so forth, creating virtuous actions. And what is to be shunned are negative actions. The Dharma is the actual refuge. The Buddha is the teacher, or the founder, you might say, the one who explicitly explained the Dharma, but the Dharma is the actual refuge. And yeah, so when you have problems and someone says, oh, you must take refuge, what does it mean, take refuge? It doesn't mean necessarily that you pray to Buddha or to Tara or to, you know, the protectors or something like that. That might be one interpretation, but the real meaning of taking refuge, the real refuge is the Dharma. So bringing to mind those Dharma understandings that you have, such as impermanence and death, puts everything in perspective. Remembering that we have a perfect human rebirth right now that's more valuable than a universe full of wish-fulfilling gems. So any kind of worldly loss of money or prestige or, you know, possessions or friends, trivial, you know, it's compared to having a life of leisure and endowment. Those are the kinds of things that you can take refuge in, your understanding. So when it says in the meditation on death, nothing helps at the time of death except the Dharma. No, it doesn't mean that the only thing that helps then is a Dharma book that you put on your head or something like that. It means that your Dharma realizations, also the Dharma that you practice during your life, that the virtue that you created gives you some assurance, and obviously it allows your mind to be calm and wise. So out of a fear of the suffering of the lower realms, this is the beginning refuge. We take refuge in the Buddha, Dharma, and Sangha out of fear of that suffering of the lower realms. You might think, I don't even believe in the lower realms. Why can't I have some other, you know, fear of samsara in general, or fear of not being able to help all sentient beings? Those are legitimate higher forms of refuge, but the very basic form of refuge that many of us skip because it's not so pleasant to think of the suffering of the lower realms. The very, very powerful initial kind of refuge is worrying about what's going to happen to us after death, that we might be born in the hells or as a hungry ghost, a preta, or as an animal. So to take refuge in the Buddha, the Dharma that he taught, and the Sangha, the spiritual community. The Sangha, Lucha Dharma Bhadra says, is the community that act as our companions to accomplish refuge, in the sense of we emulate their activities. So sometimes it means a spiritual community of monks and nuns, or the lamas, or the Bodhisattva Sangha, those that we can emulate and therefore find some practice of the Dharma through trying to imitate them, emulating them, and so forth. So when you do this meditation, as we did last time, you would recite these verses and try to meditate after, well, say, as you're saying the words, or after you've said it, you sit and you meditate on the meaning of that. You can first imagine white light coming from the merit field of Lama Chopa, like behind me here. Some of you might have a poster of that. Some of you may have this kind of tanka. This was kindly given to me by the ABC's fine monk, Dachom, Venerable Dachom. So you can visualize it in front and imagine light coming from, or something very simple, just Guru Shakyamuni in front, or your root guru, light coming and nectar coming, purifying the obstructions that prevent you from taking refuge authentically, from understanding the suffering of the lower realms and so forth. And then yellow light and nectar coming and bringing blessings of the realizations once the obstacles are gone, and having some confidence then, thinking of the meaning of these, meditating on the Lamrim, this topic. So this one, when it's talking about Dugna Bawe Mejigne, aghast at the searing blaze of the suffering of the lower realms, I take heartfelt refuge in the three precious gems. So in the Lamrim, it often comes as separate topics. There is first of all, the meditation on the suffering of the lower realms that no one likes. I think I might have mentioned last time, there was a course, the first course that I taught at Kopan in 1975. Wow, 45 years ago? 75, 25? There were maybe 80 people or so. It was the spring course. Lama Zopa Rinpoche would teach the fall course. And sometime after a while, at that time, for a couple of years, he had taught 2 courses a year. And then he started to have a Western Sangha teach the spring course. So I taught, and there was one man who came, American, who came with his wife. They had been in the Peace Corps and in the Micronesia or someplace. And they were on their way home, and he came the morning of the first. He had only heard about it at the last moment, and he wanted to take it. And I remember when we did this meditation on the suffering of the lower realms, he came to me afterwards and he said, wow, now I really, because what we tried to do is, one of the classic meditations on meditating on the suffering of the lower realms is to put yourself in the suffering of the hell realms, the cold realms, what it would be like, the suffering of the hot hells, the descriptions that the Buddha gave through his omniscient mind of what those sufferings are like, the occasional hells and so forth. And he came to me after the class and said, oh, I couldn't imagine that I would believe this. Now I really feel that these exist because I had this intuition that I've experienced this suffering in the past. So that man has become a great Buddhist scholar also, John Mccrensky. I don't know if any of you have ever heard of him. He's a teacher in his own right. They call him Lama John, I think, sometimes in America. He teaches at Boston College, which is a Catholic university. He teaches Buddhism, and he's Jewish. I mean, he was born Jewish. He's a Buddhist. But it's kind of funny. He's a Jewish person teaching Buddhism at a Catholic college, Boston College. Anyway, so one part of this is talking about the suffering of the lower realms. One part in the Lamrim meditation is talking about the taking of refuge. So you would also spend time on trying to enhance the causes in your mind, your faith in the Buddha, Dharma, and Sangha. And you know where that faith comes from? I think Aryadeva, some others said, this faith in the Buddha as a perfect teacher and the Dharma and so forth comes about through, really becomes very, very apparent and strong once you start to have some insight into the Dharma, especially a realization of emptiness, some understanding of that the person who showed this truth, which you don't find in other religions, selflessness of persons, selflessness of phenomena, the emptiness of persons, emptiness of phenomena. The person who showed this, so kind, so perfect, because it allows one to have so much freedom as you realize what we've been grasping onto from beginningless time, this sense of a self. Say in Tibetan, we say dagsin, grasping to a self of persons. This doesn't exist at all, the person that we've been imagining there. And it's such a relief, incredible freedom that allows you eventually to achieve liberation from samsara and or enlightenment as one of the fundamental realizations. So meditation on the suffering of the lower realms is included here, the taking of refuge, the meditation on refuge from the Lamrim. And then once you have taken refuge in the Lamrim, it says, what should you do? There's a section on karma in the Lamrim. And so what sort of the precept in taking refuge in the triple gem, the main thing that you have to do is to avoid negative actions, because that's taking refuge in the Dharma. That's what it means, avoiding negative actions and practicing virtue. So it says, I seek your blessings that I might eagerly strive to abandon all negativities and accomplish the accumulation of every virtue. So there you would think about, trying to develop the morality, the ethics of avoiding negative actions, and even purifying the negative actions that you've created in the past, the karmic seeds that still exist on your mind stream. How can you do that? Through the four opponent forces. So that could come in this meditation also. The four opponent forces, regretting the negative actions you've done from the depth of your heart. Not just, like, oh, I broke a rule, I'm sorry, something like that, but really understanding the negative actions we've done out of ignorance, out of, not being skillful, that we've harmed others, we've created negative karma, and to feel some remorse about that's one of the most powerful things to eliminate that. To make an intention not to do it again in the future, to take refuge in the Buddha, Dharma, and Sangha, and to do some counteracting virtue to help to overcome the negative actions. It's called the power of the remedy. So that's also included here in that we would strive to abandon all negativities and accomplish the accumulation of every virtue. So when we talk about the Mahayana morality, the morality of the threefold morality of the Mahayana, it says to abandon negativity, accomplish to accumulate all virtuous collections and to benefit sentient beings. So here it's talking about those first two. So when you meditate here, when you say that verse, there's a lot to cover in the Lamrim. But as you, like say, as I mentioned before, if you were to do this every day as a glance meditation, every day you should kind of specialize in one of the verses. You go through all of the verses. This gives you a panorama of where you are and where you're going on the path. And then put special emphasis on one of the verses. Maybe when you very begin, you spend more time on the Guru devotion. And then after some time, either one day or a week of putting more emphasis on that, you meditate on the meditation on the perfect human rebirth and death and impermanence, the second verse. And then this third verse, when you came to that, you would spend time on these various meditations, the suffering of the lower realms, putting yourself into the sufferings, imagining them as you do in a Lamrim retreat. Then meditation on taking refuge, trying to develop the causes of that. And then the inspiration, the resolution to abandon non-virtue and to practice virtue. Okay, so now the next verse is one that we're coming to new today. So this is the next section in the Lama Tropa. This section is called the way to train the mind in the path that is common with the being of middling capacity. Training the mind in the common path of the practitioner of middling capacity is what it says in your text there. So this is the verse. So this has two sections. Developing the attitude that strives for liberation, and the way to train in the path that leads to liberation. So it's the next verse. So this verse is generating the attitude that strives for liberation. So this begins, what does it say? Yeah. Violently tossed amidst waves of karma and mental afflictions, plagued by the many sea monsters of the three kinds of suffering, I seek your blessings to develop an intense longing to be liberated or free, to be free from the infinite and frightening great ocean of existence. Ledang nyomong balung, taktu tuk, dugnel sungi chusen mampose, tame jikrun siso chempole, tardo shuktak kepa jingilop. Tardo is a name sometimes given to Tibetans. There's a Geshe Tardo that used to be at University of Virginia, where Jeffrey Hopkins was the head of the Buddhist Studies department for many years, Geshe Tardo. So Tardo, tar is short for tarpa, liberation, moksha in Sanskrit. And dupa means to desire, to wish. So the wish or longing to be free, longing for liberation. So this is one side of what it means, what renunciation means. Renunciation is a state of mind that has seen first of all, the disadvantages of cyclic existence. Feeling, when we talk about someone who's renounced, is that even you put gold or precious things before someone, you offer someone some great things, they completely uninterested, because for them, that is all the nature of suffering. Like putting a bale of hay before a lion. A lion only eats meat, right? Carnivorous animal. So to put a bale of hay before them, it might be food for the cows or some other animals. Wouldn't be interesting to us either, just a bale of hay, but just to put vegetables before him. He just sits there the same. So I remember Lama Sopa Lama Yeshe used to talk about Kuna Lama Rinpoche, one of the great lamas that taught the Dalai Lama the Bodhisattva Charyavatara. His Holiness often mentions Kuna Lama. Kuna Lama, I think, was from Kuno in around Ladakh, and he had studied in Tibetan Buddhism, but as Indian, and later he lived as a sadhu on the Ganges River, practicing, the Mahayana, even Tantra, unbeknownst to all the other sadhus there. But when he came to the Kalachakra in India that the Dalai Lama was giving one of the first times, His Holiness stopped and took off took the robe off his shoulder and prostrated in the dirt before Kuna Lama, who was dressed in this white dhoti, kind of like just the Indian sadhus. And the guards, everyone were just amazed, what is this? Because Kuna Lama had many years had taught the Dalai Lama, the Bodhisattva Charyavatara, and other subjects. So it said that when someone would bring offerings to Kuna Lama, he would accept them out of kindness so that the people that were offering would have the karma of him accepting them, but he would immediately put them under his cot or his bed or his seat that he was sitting on, and he would give them away to other people. He wasn't interested in any of these things. So one part of renunciation is seeing the defects of cyclic existence. The other part is desiring liberation, to be free from this. Once you've realized that this is suffering, then desiring to be free, and that has various parts too, to recognize that it's possible to achieve liberation. Is it possible to achieve enlightenment and liberation? There's a book, Is Enlightenment Possible? I think something like that, from I can't remember if that's the name of the book or not. So if you have an insight into emptiness, you realize that it's an antidote to the mind that grasps to a self, a person, and a self, a phenomena. And you recognize that grasping that we have, which is the root cause of cyclic existence, can be eroded, can be overcome by correct understanding. So you develop an appreciation, an understanding that liberation and enlightenment are possible. So that's another part of renunciation. So here, violently tossed amidst waves of karma and affliction. So what do we say? Leidan nyonmong. Lei is karma. Nyonmong is klesha, the afflictions. Balung praktutuk. So I like to think this is kind of like talking about the second noble truth, right? You know what the second noble truth is? The origin of suffering. What is it? What is the origin of suffering? What's the cause? Well, the direct cause is the karma that we've created in the past, negative actions, the non-virtuous actions that we've created in the past. But the indirect cause of that is the delusions that cause us to create those negative actions. So leidan nyonmong, balong daktutu, agitated, strongly agitated, or violently tossed, it says here, amidst waves, balong, of karma and mental afflictions. In Muntu Dharma Bhadra's text, he takes it a little bit differently. He even takes, he says the karma of our continuum, of our mental continuum, are the waves. I would say this word balong, often we translate just the two syllables as waves, but ba by itself means waves. Longwa means kind of swirling. So he takes violently tossed by the waves of karma and the swirling of the nyonmon, the klesha, the afflictions, stirred up. So that's kind of helping us to recall the second noble truth. And then dugnel sungi chusen mambose, plagued by the multitude of watery denizens of the three sufferings. So what this is making is kind of an analogy. The analogy here is that cyclic existence is like an ocean. This is one of the great analogies of cyclic existence. Another analogy for cyclic existence that we'll encounter in the next verse is that cyclic existence is like a prison, a very difficult to endure prison camp. But here this is one of the famous analogies for cyclic existence, because an ocean is something that's very deep and very vast, and that's where we're located, and we're constantly tossed by our karma. We're so in one sense we agitate the ocean due to our karma and our delusions. That's one way of understanding it. Here it's the way it's translated in English here, it sounds like you are experiencing those waves of karma and afflictions. But the next line is talking about dugnel sumgi chusem mambose, plagued by the many sea monsters of the three kinds of suffering. That's the first noble truth. So the first noble truth is the truth of suffering. The three kinds of suffering, suffering of suffering. That's the main suffering of the lower realms, although they experience all three kinds of suffering. The Gyurwe dugnel, the changeable suffering, is the main suffering of the human realm, which we don't recognize. I mean, we also have suffering of suffering, obviously, but the one that we, as humans, we might be able to recognize is that what we call happiness is actually the nature of suffering. It's what's called changeable suffering, because any happiness we have never eliminates that suffering from the root. We don't find any satisfaction the more we eat. I notice that sometimes when sometimes I had a craving recently for something crunchy, so I'd grab a box of cereal, dry cereal, granola or something, and with a spoon while I'm, relaxing, to eat some of that. And later, because of these cereals, box cereals, have some sugar in it, I would have some upset stomach. So recognizing that these things are changeable suffering. At one moment, it brings some satisfaction, but it always eventually changes into something that's recognizable as suffering. Even at the moment we're experiencing something that's pleasurable, praise or some pleasure of the senses, taste or crunch or embrace or whatever, praise, power. Even at that moment, it's not real pleasure. It's just the reducing of one suffering, replacing it with another suffering. There's nothing within cyclic existence that is actually pure pleasure. The only real pleasure is the pleasure of the Dharma happiness. So the second line is talking about the first noble truth. The first line is actually talking about the second noble truth, which is the cause of that. So I like to think that we agitate this ocean of samsara due to our karma that we create and our delusions. They cause our life to be, the samsara to be agitated. And because of that, we experience the suffering of the multitude of different kinds of almost like sea monsters coming out of the ocean of samsara. Tame jikrun siso chempole, tardo shukja kepa jingilop. Grant me blessings to generate intense desire to be free, longing to be liberated from this ocean of that is, and the ocean has these two qualities. Tame means no end, endless. That doesn't mean that samsara has no end. It means that if we don't do anything, if we don't practice the Dharma, it has no end. Jikrun means fearful. You know, it is because of the suffering, because of our mind not being able to control our mind and so forth. In the commentary to this verse, Mutu Dharmabhadra's commentary, he quotes Drupchen Ling Repa, the Maha Siddhi Ling Repa. So you've heard of Milarepa. Ling Repa was another, I think he was mainly Drupa Khargu Lama, maybe just the next generation after Milarepa. He studied with Pakma Drupa and so forth. So he quotes Ling Repa that in the city of endless samsara, what do I say, limitless, infinite, or tame means without limit. Jikten Chuge ki rolang ken, the what is it? You know what rolangs are? Zombies, right? The zombies of the eight worldly dharmas reside. Truto jiksu rungwe chikte nada. They exist in the jiksu rungwa truto, the fearful cemetery. There's one of the eight great cemeteries around Bodh Gaya. One of the great cemeteries, or we actually, truto actually means charnel grounds, where you put the dead bodies to be consumed by the animals or the elements and so forth, charnel grounds. So I remember once in Dharamsala in McLeodganj, after a teaching by Serkon Rinpoche, Serkon Senchab Rinpoche, Lama Zopa had been translating for Serkon Rinpoche, so it was mainly the Western Sangha, and we were on our way back to Shita up the hill. And Lama Zopa was, I think it was that day or maybe another day, he was just standing there by the bus stop, just looking at the people coming and going. And I said, "What, Rinpoche, what are you doing?" And he said he was watching samsara. So it's sort of like this, the people engaged, like the zombie-like eight worldly dharmas in the endless samsara reside there in this fearful cemetery, fearful charnel ground. So the ocean of samsara is jiksurungwa. That means it's suitable to be feared. It's fearful, frightening, and it is endless. So this is talking about the Lamrim meditations on developing the wish for liberation. So when we talk about the Lamrim, as it's found in Lamrim Chemo, this is talking about both the, recognizing the general sufferings of cyclic existence. That's the sufferings, what we call the three kinds of suffering. We said the suffering of suffering, changeable suffering, and compounding suffering. So the example of suffering is suffering feeling. Example of changeable suffering is pleasant feeling. An example of compounding suffering, all compounding suffering, all extensive suffering is neutral feeling. So even neutral feelings are considered to be dugnal, suffering, or you, if you like to, if that doesn't sound right to you, you can say unsuitable, or, you know, I think in the Theravada tradition, modern tradition, what's the other word they use? I wish there was a group of you who could answer back. There's another word they use rather than saying suffering. Unsuitability or something like that. So this is talking about developing the wish for liberation when you meditate on this verse. Then the next verse is let me say, Nima. So the method to train in the path that leads to liberation, training to obtain liberation is in the commentary that you read. Soka sonra drawa koadi gawe selta tongwe lopangne lapsum pakpe norgi sosungte tarpe gelsen zimba jingi lob. So is the same word like sopa. You know what sopa means? Lama sopa. Geshe sopa in America spelled it differently, spelled it with an S, S-O-P-A, but so means, or whether you use a Z or an S, sopa means patience. I'm not sure, maybe that was Rinpoche's special practice this lifetime, or maybe sometimes when he's acts as the wrathful guru, people used to joke about Geshe sopa that way. Sometimes he would have people do things that were difficult, so we had to be patient with him. Soka ka means difficult. So difficult to be patient with, or difficult to endure. You can say unbearable, right? It's difficult to bear, unbearable. Sonra means prison. Dawa means like, prison-like. Korwa means samsara. This cyclic existence, which is like a difficult to endure prison. So this is one of the other great analogies, or is that the right word? Analogy? Simile, I guess, of cyclic existence, that it is like a prison. Because a prison is something that you don't have any freedom to leave. You might be able to escape. You have to figure out a way to how to escape. But while you're there, it's usually not pleasant. It's difficult to endure. It's unbearable. Like, well, some prisons are more unbearable. Maybe some of the prisons in Europe, I can't remember, in Holland or some other places, when there were some movies I saw that someone was, what was it? The girl with the dragon tattoo. Remember the trilogy of movies? So the protagonist, the guy who was helping her, was put into prison because he'd broken some law. I think it was in Denmark, rather, not in Holland. And it was like he had his own computer and television, his own room, and good food and very nice bed. It was not really an unbearable prison, except that it was a prison that he couldn't leave at his wish. But there are other prisons, like in Thailand or other countries, or say, China, or in some places in America, where it's so, it's unbearable. So this is the analogy here for another analogy for samsara. The difficult to this samsara, which is like an unbearable prison. Gelwe sartar tongwe lopangne, having given up, having abandoned the attitude that sees it, that unbearable prison, like a gawe cell. Gawa means pleasant, cell means garden, like a pleasure garden, like the place that Sui came off and took me in Singapore, this beautiful dome with all these flowering plants, like a pleasure garden. So we often see samsara as the having that potential. Oh, samsara, if you make enough money, if you look good enough, if you get fit enough so that others find you attractive, or if you have enough power, it's like a pleasure garden. So that's a big misconception. That's something that we have to overcome, to recognize that while we're in cyclic existence, we have no real freedom, and we constantly are experiencing suffering, so it's unbearable. That's the very nature of cyclic existence. I think I've told this story before, when there's fireworks going off here, if you can hear something going on in the background. I think it's fireworks. It's fireworks, not people shooting guns. When I went to my first Koban course in 1974, I remember feeling some suffering when we tried to concentrate the mind. And I can't remember exactly the context. So I had planned to see Lama Zopa Rinpoche to ask a question if there was something I could do. Is there some yoga? Maybe I could do some yoga to overcome that or something. Felt it in my chest here, my heart area. And before I got the appointment with Lama Zopa Rinpoche, in one of the lectures, he said, what I thought he said, heart is the nature of fire. So I paid attention. So when you listen, even you're listening now, some of you may half listening, or you're paying attention to the kids or the cats or something like that. But when he said that, suddenly I paid attention. Heart is the nature of fire. While we're in cyclic existence, it's the very nature of things to be suffering. So to not be surprised by that. This is kind of one of the implications of this verse. Giving up the mind that sees this unbearable prison of cyclic existence as like a pleasure garden. So understanding that you can be more at ease. And I remember the next time I did that meditation, I tried to think, this is the nature of cyclic existence, is suffering. And when I did that, the pain in my heart went away. So during one of the tea breaks afterwards, and the meditation course, I mentioned to people, oh, what Rinpoche said, that was the answer to my question. And they said, what was the thing that he said? I said, when we said heart is the nature of fire, and they went, what? He didn't say heart is the nature of fire. He said heat is the nature of fire. Of course, right? But I had heard, sometimes we hear what we need to hear, right? The Buddha's speech sometimes is heard by different people in whatever way they need to hear. Of course, heat is the nature of fire, so you can't be angry or upset when you stick your hand in the fire and it's hot. That's its nature. Soka sonra drawe koa di gawe selta tongwe lobangne, having abandoned the mind that views unbearable prison of cyclic existence as a pleasure garden, pleasure grove. Lapsum patpe norgi sosunte tarpe gelsen simbar jingilob. Please bless me to hold the three trainings as the treasure of the superior's wealth, and thereby to uphold liberation's banner. So remember what this means. This is the actual method that leads to liberation. So once we've got the desire to get out of cyclic existence, having a sense of renunciation, the two senses, cyclic existence is this nature of suffering, and that there is a destination that we can achieve called liberation, then we have to practice to get out of that. What's the main practice that leads to liberation? The main practice is what are called the three higher trainings. the higher training of ethics or morality, higher training of concentration, the higher training of wisdom. So here, when it's saying lapsum means the three trainings, or the three higher trainings, pakpe norgi zozunte, they've translated to hold the three trainings as the treasure of the superior's wealth. It's not even, that translation doesn't even accord with the Tibetan or the commentaries. The three trainings, according to Dharmabhadra's commentary here, the three trainings are the superior jewels. You could say pakpa, what did they call here? Arya, or what did they say? Superiors, like the Arya beings, we call superior beings, but it doesn't have to be the beings. The lapsum gi paknor gi bangzo, to hold those as one's own, to take those three higher trainings as your essential practice. In that regard, just to remind you, earlier it said to take the essence of this lifetime, as our, what did it say? In the second verse on perfect human rebirth. Don me se di jawe mi hua don den ningpo lenpar jimiga. Let me take the meaningful essence of this life. I'd mentioned last time, like the swan that can take the milk out of the water that it's been poured in, let all the rest of the non-nutritious water go out of the holes out of the bottom of its beak. So here we want to try to take another kind of essence here. Can you hear that in the background? Lapsum pakpe norgu sosunte tarpe gelsin zimba jingilob. So we want to take this as our principal practice, the three higher trainings. So it's said that to escape from samsara, we need to have the wisdom that realizes selflessness of persons, let's say, or selflessness of phenomena. That's the higher training of wisdom. But that alone is not enough. We need to be able to remain on that, with that wisdom, on the object. Like say, for instance, we see the false self and we realize it doesn't really exist that way, maybe just for an instant with that wisdom. That's not sufficient. We need to remain on that for some period of time, long time. So we need to have the higher training in concentration. But to have the higher training of concentration, we need to eliminate the gross and subtle wanderings of the mind. And the way to bring that about is the higher training in ethics or morality. So they act to support one another. Lama Yeshe used to say a lot of people were interested in developing single-pointed concentration. Maybe they weren't even concerned about wisdom. They just wanted to have like psychic powers. They heard that if you had samadhi or single-pointed concentration, shamatha, that you could develop clairvoyance and other qualities. But he said they didn't realize the essential method to bring about that training in concentration was morality, ethics. So the three trainings are the superior jewels, and to hold that treasure, Tarpe Gelsen Simba Jingilob, grant me blessings to hold. Here it says Tarpe Gelsen, which literally means the victory banner of liberation. Sounds like, you know, if you're practicing the 3 higher trainings, you're holding the victory banner of liberation that brings about liberation. But in Ngutru Dharmabhadra's commentary, he has an interesting way of talking about that. He says that to hold means to bring about the these 3 things: the body gowned in the robes, Dharma robes, which is symbolic of victory over the army of the delusions. So in other words, if you take ordination as a monk or nun, you know, you wear these robes, Nurmic saffron-colored robes. That's symbolic of that your main occupation in life is not to be preoccupied with only the superficial appearances of this lifetime, but to be striving for liberation. And that your speech is endowed with the Tripitaka. You know what the Tripitaka, the 3 baskets of the teachings? And your mind is endowed with the 3 trainings. So in so doing, that's the meaning of holding. So grant me blessings to hold these things that symbolize. So instead of saying Geltsen, which usually means victory banner, he says Gelway Tensen, which means the symbols of victory over the army of the delusions, and that symbolize liberation from the prison of samsara. So someone had mentioned in personal communication that their sister had listened last time and said, it was too complicated. I didn't understand what he was talking about. So I hope, you know, some of you who are listening to this as one of your first teachings, this might be very difficult, but it should be augmented with doing some other reading about the Lamrim if you haven't heard of these things, the stages of the path. Those of you who are older students, maybe this can be kind of a review of what you already know, in a way to how to every day to meditate on this glance meditation on the Lamrim. Like I said a couple of times, that Geshe Repton used to say one of the great regrets of his life was that there were some days when he was so busy he didn't have chance to meditate on the Lamrim, because the Lamrim was that which was, it was just like nectar that would soothe the mind, you know, soothe the heart when there were all these kinds of problems, understanding these things. So let's just meditate for a moment on these 2 verses. You can imagine from the merit field, say His Holiness the Dalai Lama or Lama Zopa Rinpoche or whatever your gurus are, the other Buddhas and Bodhisattvas, lineage lamas, the meditational deities, Tara and Manjushri and Vajrapani and Shakyamuni Buddha and, you know, Vajrayogini and so forth, light, white light coming, bathing you with white nectar coming, also purifying you of the obstructions, the hindrances that prevent you from making these realizations. And then golden light coming, golden nectar coming and filling you up with the blessings that you might be able to make these realizations. There's no, as our minds are empty of inherent existence, there's no real inherent obstacle. All of these things can be abandoned through practice, accumulating merit, purifying negative karma, and through praying to the gurus. And then to think of these two verses, training the mind in the common path of the practitioner of middling capacity, violently tossed amidst waves of karma and mental affliction, or constant, violently tossing this ocean of samsara due to our karma and delusion, besieged by the watery denizens of this ocean of samsara, the three sufferings, suffering of suffering, changeable suffering, all compounding pervasive suffering. Please bless me to develop an intense longing to be free from this endless and frightening ocean of existence, ocean of samsara. So to try to develop that understanding, try to develop that particular attitude that seeks liberation from this, recognizing that we are caught in this great ocean of cyclic existence, that there's nothing here that is within cyclic existence that is safe. It's like being in a floating in the ocean, besieged by all of these animals that are coming, like sharks and monsters coming up, nipping at your flesh. Very frightening. And the ocean is endless, both in extent and depth, and very frightening. That's to try to develop a strong wish to be free from this infinite and frightening great ocean of the existence that has these frightening aspects. And then the next verse, having abandoned the mind that views this unbearable prison of cyclic existence as a pleasure grove, I seek your blessings to hold the three higher trainings, the treasure of the superiors, the wealth of the superiors, and thereby to hold liberation's banner. So wanting to be free is one thing. It's just like wishing bodhicitta is one thing. And actually engaging bodhicitta means actually going about and doing it. So the first verse was talking about wishing to be free from samsara. Now this is actually having developed that strong wish to be free, now finding the opportunity, how do we escape from this prison? We have to follow the three higher trainings. We need to practice ethics to calm the mind. We have to spend time in concentrating and developing wisdom, higher training of wisdom, that this particular wisdom that sees, that understands the selflessness of persons and phenomena. Otherwise, we're going to be stuck in this ocean forever. That's the method to bring about this liberation and to bring about enlightenment. So it's 10:08, that can't be right, 11:18 here. I guess it's 11:18 in the morning there. Before we end, do you have any questions? Any comments?
Hi, Venerable George. So far, there's no anyone who has raised hand or posed any questions yet. So maybe the participants, if you have any questions, please raise your hands so that we can unmute you.
Yeah, there's someone raising their hand. Maybe you see someone else.
So far, none has raised yet.
I see Violet Sun raising her hand.
Okay. So physically raise her hand. Okay. Okay. I will unmute her.
Okay. Hi, Violet. She's not unmuted yet. Maybe you have. Do you have to unmute yourself,
Yeah.
Violet, or does?
I've asked. Yes, correct.
Oh,
She's
there
unmuted.
you go.
Hi, Venerable. Thank you very much. I have this question. Basically, is that the three higher trainings have this training on concentration and wisdom. What does it difference from the six perfections where we have concentration, also have wisdom too? So what's the difference?
Right. So the six perfections, I have 5 things. The six perfections can be included in the 3 trainings. So, so the perfection of wisdom is the higher training of wisdom. The perfection of concentration is the higher training of concentration, and the other, what do I say? Generosity, the perfection of generosity, ethics, and patience and perseverance all are included in the training of ethics or morality. So sometimes in the study of the perfection of wisdom, it's explained that the 6 perfections are all, there's nothing in the 6 perfections that is different than the 3 trainings. I mean, they are all the Mahayana Bodhisattvas trainings, 3 higher trainings. So in the Hinayana or the Theravada, when we talk about the 3 higher trainings, those are conjoined with the desire for liberation, 3 higher trainings. When they're conjoined with bodhicitta and extended, then we expand the 3 higher trainings into the 6 perfections. Okay? Okay. Anyone else have something?
Not at the moment. I saw, okay, there is one that has posted in the chat. So I'll just read it out. She said, hi, Venerable George. When you mentioned integrate Dharma in daily life at the start of the talk, do you mean to include meditation in our daily practice?
You can do that, but whatever you do, say, for instance, if you're waiting in the dentist office, rather than reading the magazine, you can do Tonglen. You can imagine taking on the suffering of sentient beings, maybe even the people that you hear in the room having their teeth drilled or something. Imagine taking that on and to send out your own qualities of your body, your wealth, your merits of the 3 times. When you walk up the steps, or is it when you walk down steps, you can think, like this, may I be willing to go to the lower realms for the sake of sentient beings? May I be able to do the dirty tasks of cleaning the toilets, doing the things. And when you go up, may I lead sentient beings like this? May I lead sentient beings into the upper realms and into definite goodness and so forth. Later, when we talk about the 7, what is it called? We talked about the 8 verses of training in mind, the 7-fold mind training, much more extensive than the 8 verses, even though it sounds like 7. Those of you who are familiar with it, there are various ways to think, even in words, in your everyday life. Like I just mentioned, say, for instance, when Lama Yeshe came back from America after the first time he came to America, and it might have been 1974 or 73, I can't remember. He said that the student who had been to Kopan and had gone back to America, who had made the greatest progress back in America, was a boy that was working in a grocery store, putting the canned goods up on the shelves. You know, you might have thought, oh, it would be someone who started a Dharma center or was helping the poor or something like that, because he was always thinking, like this, may I arrange the minds of sentient beings? Or when he was washing the floor of the grocery store, he was thinking, like this, may I eliminate the delusions and suffering from minds and bodies of sentient beings. You know, you've heard the story of these two brothers, Lam Chung and Lam Chen. One of them was a disciple of the Buddha. When he was born, there were some obstacles, so there were prayers that were made at the intersection of some big roads, so he was called Lam Chen. But when the younger one was born, the maid took him out to some small intersection where there weren't so many holy beings that were coming by to pray for him. And he was very dull, and even when he was taught a verse of Dharma, many, many times he couldn't remember it. Even when he was taught one letter of the alphabet, he had difficulty learning the second one. When he learned the second letter, he'd forget the first, like this. But finally, the Buddha gave him a task of sweeping the floor of the monastery and cleaning the shoes of the Sangha, of the mud, you know, the sandals. And the Buddha told him, sweep away dust, sweep away, odor or something like that, stain. And he came to realize in doing so that this referred to the obstructions in the mind. So when you sweep your room, when you vacuum, you can think like this, may I eliminate the delusions from my own mind and the minds of all sentient beings? When you wash the dishes or the clothes, you can think the same thing. I somehow, when you see that you know, the dirt on the plate goes away as you're washing it, you can get some confidence that the delusions likewise can be eliminated from your mind and the minds of other sentient beings. So there are ways like this of integrating the Dharma into everything you do, rather than letting your mind get distracted. Even when you're in the bathroom, you're taking a shower or washing, going to the toilet, there are ways of meditating in all of these activities. So not to let your mind be distracted in the meaningless activities of this life, but in that way, these activities are no longer meaningless. They actually take on great meaning. Okay, that's one way of thinking. So you can search through other teachings, through talking to other students. There are other ways of integrating the Dharma into everyday life like that. Okay.
Hi, Venerable George. Maggie, the person who has asked the question, has a follow-up question. Could she ask you?
Sure, of course.
Okay, Maggie, please proceed. Yeah.
Hi, Venerable George.
Hi, Maggie.
This is Margie here.
Oh, Margie. Oh, Margie. Oh.
I'm sorry. Yeah, I'm sorry.
Thank you very much
Okay.
for your explanation. So let me clarify again. If I understand you correctly earlier, does it mean that when you're in your daily life, you try to be mindful of what you're doing? So it's considered part as practicing Dharma, integrating into your daily lives?
Yes, that being mindful, when we talk about and there are many popular courses in mindfulness and so forth, that in itself is one of the exercises that you can do to, to help to generate single-pointed concentration, because to have single-pointed concentration, to have concentration, you need to have mindfulness. You need to be able to keep the mind on one thing. One of the great lamas of that were my teacher and Lama Zopa Rinpoche's teacher, Song Rinpoche, he used to say when we would ask him, why don't we do any of these mindfulness courses like the, Goenka or these other people that are doing mindfulness, courses on mindfulness, walking and eating and this sort of thing. And Rinpoche said, oh, those are, that's okay. But in the Mahayana, the main object of mindfulness is the bodhicitta. So being mindful, like for instance, when we talk about the training of the mind, being mindful of the kindness of sentient beings. They give us the opportunity to practice patience. They've given us, when they were our mothers, they gave us our bodies. They gave education to us as we were, even how to potty train or how to sew or to say the alphabet, and say everything that we know is due to the kindness, original kindness of our mothers. They protected us. And even when they weren't our mothers, they were kind in setting up a system that allowed us to receive a wage by working. And they paved the roads, they delivered the groceries or the Amazon. Do you have Amazon in Singapore? I don't know, Amazon trucks. So these are that, being mindful of your breathing or being mindful of walking or eating, those are always good. But in the Mahayana, the main objects of mindfulness is the kindness of others and the shortcomings of the self-cherishing thought. All of my problems, as one of the verses that will be coming, stem from my habitual, is this demon of self-cherishing. Because of considering myself more important or my comfort to be of utmost importance, I've been lazy, of course, but I've also created negative karma. I've harmed others. This the basis of racism. That's such a big question in the United States right now, probably around the world. Considering oneself to be more important than others. So that's another object of mindfulness, to remember the kindness of all and to remember the shortcomings of the self-cherishing thought, and to develop the desire to exchange oneself and others. What that means is not to become others, but to consider one's other people's viewpoint or welfare more important than your own. To take that as the fundamental heart practice. So those are we'll be talking more in the coming weeks about those. And many of you have heard that before, so there's just a reminder about that. That's probably, from a Mahayana point of view, that is a higher practice, more useful. But for a beginner, maybe that's, without a lot of training, maybe that's too much to contemplate, not having the fundamental teachings about cyclic existence and so forth. So certainly to be mindful of one's breathing, to be mindful of one's actions, that is a very good thing, because that keeps the mind on something which doesn't allow your mind to be just focusing on your self-interest and meaningless thoughts and gossip and so forth.
Sorry, maybe I should have clarified myself. When I talk about mindfulness, I actually mean what you have just mentioned. Like you be mindful of your actions so that it doesn't inconvenience other people. Be mindful of like being punctual so that other people don't have to wait for you. That's right. my meaning of being mindfulness. So I think you have kind of answered my second part of the question. My second part of the question was, if we integrate like Dharma practice into our daily life, like being helpful, being punctual so that other people doesn't need to wait for us, things like that. That's what I mean by being mindful.
Yes.
Does that count as Dharma practice?
Yes, definitely. And especially if that's the reason that you're doing it. Sometimes we grow up in families that have a culture of having that attitude of being considerate of others. Somehow we've created the karma in past lives to be born to that family,
Mhm.
but what we have to do is to enhance that more with a deeper understanding of the Dharma. Like, for instance, in America right now, there's some people in the area that I live here. I'm in North Carolina. There's some people that consider it a burden to wear a mask when they go outside while this epidemic of COVID-19 is going on. So there are others who say, they can't believe that. They think, you know, that's how inconsiderate, that's, you know, considering your own personal, you know, displeasure in having to wear a mask while you're with others, not taking into consideration the suffering that you may cause others.
Yep.
So that's involved also.
Okay, thank you very much.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you. So it's now 11:35. We've gone an hour and a half. Unless someone has another pressing question, we'll end there. Yeah, that's fireworks that's going on. Can you hear that?
Yes, we could.
Yeah. I was thinking maybe it was my neighbor. Sometimes when he has some problems, he drinks some wine or something, he goes out and he shoots his pistol in the air or something. I was thinking it might be that. So thank you very much. Hope to see you next week.
Thank you very much, Venerable George.
Take care.
Take care.
Bye now.
See you. Hi, just a reminder, there's no class next week.